will introduce our two speakers tonight. So we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the metropolitan center, the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home of Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and at the Black Research Network, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on the land. As Yang and Tuck remind us, because settler colonialism is built upon an entangled triad structure of settler, native, slave, the decolonial desires of all of us gathered are an important part of acknowledging the complexity and the importance of good relations. Okay, so now I will move to the introduction of our speakers. Okay, so for Caroline Hossein, we have a extra special announcement. Today it is publicly published that she is the new Canada Research Chair of Africana Development and Feminist Political Economy. And I suspect this might be the first time that several of those words have been used in a Canada Research Chair. So congratulations, Caroline, you make us all proud. Caroline is also an associate professor in the Department of Global Development Studies at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, and cross-appointed to the graduate program of political science at the University of Toronto. Hussein's research navigates solidarity economies, a movement that started in the Global South, which prioritizes social profitability instead of financial gain. In 2017, Hossein founded the Diverse Solidarity Economies, or DICE Collective, to advocate for culturally diverse community economies. And clearly, we are going to hear some more about that tonight. So Caroline's interlocutor is the singular, stellar Ebun Joseph. Ebun is a diversity and race relations consultant, module coordinator, and lecturer of Black Studies at the University College Dublin, with research focus and several works on labor markets and race relations. Her recent book, Racial Stratification in Ireland, A Critical Race Theory of Labor Market Inequality, was published in 2020 by Manchester University Press. Joseph is also an author, TV panelist, columnist, and equity activist, obviously. So these are the two shining stars who we've brought together for this important conversation about feminist economies. And the way that we've organized our gathering today is both Caroline and Ebun will make opening statements and then engage in dialogue, and then we will open it up to the room and online questions to the best of our ability to have a conversation among all of us. I mean, part of the work, if I'm not being too presumptuous, part of the work and part of the politics is reassessing hierarchies, and I think that why not structure that into how we're gathered this evening as well. So I hope everyone is comfortable. There's a washroom upstairs. You're welcome to wear a mask. I think you're also welcome not to wear a mask. Please join us, Ebun and Caroline.
Well, we have to do the PowerPoint.
Ah,
Okay, so welcome today. I just have a few thank yous to give. First to the director of the BRN, the Black Research Network, Professor Beth Coleman, for giving us the space to share our work on radical feminist economics, and for believing in this project and making us come together. Maria Williams at the BRN, I admire and thank you for all of your organization that you do every day to make these events possible, and it really does nourish the Black faculty here at the University of Toronto. Vice Principal of Research and Innovation at UTSC, my campus, is Professor Irina Creed. I want to thank you for your leadership, for contributing to this event, for being here, and for supporting the body of the research, not just for me, but for all of the DICE Collective, so thank you. My name is Caroline Shenaz Hossein. I'm a professor of global development and political science at the University of Toronto, Scarborough. I'm especially happy to be a part of Scarborough. I'm also appointed to the graduate program of political science downtown. Recently, I've been appointed as the interim director for the Institute of Inclusive Economies and Sustainable Livelihoods. Humbled to be here with my fellow DICE member, Dr. Ebun Joseph. She'll speak to you about what ROSCAs are like in the Irish context. We met in the summer at Maynooth University just outside of Dublin and had a great conversation about how Black women cooperators fare in that country context. So first, I want to sort of briefly give you an idea of the kinds of work that I'm doing. For many years, I've been publishing, as you can see, extensively on feminist economics, primarily focused on cooperative economies for people of the African diaspora. But today's talk, I'm going to central some of my ideas around a book that's forthcoming, The Crooked One. That means that it's still sort of underway, but I know now I've done all the reviews, so I'm pretty confident in what I'm going to be speaking about today. And that's going to be a book called The Banker Ladies, and it's going to be published by the University of Toronto Press. But at first, I want to say a word on what the DICE Collective is. So the DICE Collective is the Diverse Solidarity Economies Collective. We are a group of feminist scholars that Dr. Ebun, who you'll hear from, is a member of that collective. We collaboratively work together at the intersection of politics and economics. Many of us in that group are studying member-owned cooperative institutions, and our goal is really to move the development enterprise away from charity or aid models and to think about bottom-up solidarity systems. And so Dr. Ebun, who's here, in the book that's forthcoming in 2023, we're looking at Beyond Racial Capitalism. She actually co-authored one of my favorite chapters in the book, looking at the AJO system, a ROSCA that's used in Nigeria in the Dublin context. So what are these things called rotating savings and credit associations? For short, I'm going to call them ROSCAs. ROSCAs are cooperatives managed by people who often share the same socioeconomic class background. They are alienated from access to financial goods. The term ROSCAs actually seldomly used among the people who use these systems because it's so global. They're usually called the name in their local vernacular. And it's good to say these names, I think. I've come to a place where now I used to always refer to them as ROSCAs or mutual aid to have acceptance in the wider society. But so bear with me, because it's a way of taking inventory of what these names are called. Somali Hugbud, Jamaican Patna, Indian Chit, Guyanese Box Hand, Haitian Soul and Chinese Hua. So what you're getting here is a real global phenomenon of the same phenomenon, which is informal cooperative banks that people are self-managing. Then there are chamas in Kenya, rounds in Zimbabwe, restaurant for the Congolese, ekub for Eritreans and Ethiopians, and tandas for the people of Latin America. And when people come here to Canada, but as Dr. Ebun Joseph will show you too, in Ireland, people bring their financial technologies with them. Just as they bring music and good food and all these other wonderful cultural things, people bring their money systems with them too. So ROSCA members decide, for those of you that are new to this phenomenon, how their cooperative will be structured. Members contribute a fixed hand, which is a sum of money, and it's usually referred to as a hand. They just say a hand. And then this fixed sum of money is contributed on a cycle. It could be a weekly basis or a monthly basis to a larger pool. And then that lump sum of money from the pool is then collected and shared with members in turn until everyone accesses a sum of money. The women who organize these ROSCAs call themselves the banker ladies, and they adhere to the same 7 principles as formal cooperative institutions. So in 2007, I was researching a type of development finance. Some of you in the room or online may know of it. It's called microfinance in 3 Caribbean countries. And I interviewed about 600 people in these countries and found that professionalized banks that would target people for microfinance and who were concerned about poverty alleviation were really limited in what they could do. And so then I started interviewing, towards the end of that book, people who are leading informal cooperative finance, so these ROSCA users. And now this is the project that I'm talking about. It expanded to 5 countries and here in Canada as well. So I'm looking at 2 countries in Canada, 2 cities in Canada, Montreal and Toronto. And you have to know that these are 2 major financial capitals, for those of you that are not familiar with the Canadian context. And it's also where we find a large number of people of the African diaspora. And so when women cooperators, when you see these women cooperators, about 443, the sample doesn't look like much. But remember that each banker lady represents the members of their group. And that can range anywhere from 8 to 80 members, right? And actually in Haiti, hundreds of people would be in a Haitian soul. And so I think it was in 2018, I met a woman who was running a Cameroon Jiangji here in the Toronto area, and she had upwards of 1,000 members spread across the country through virtual ROSCA finance. So what I actually needed to understand these thousands of women who are collecting money informally, who often, especially in the Canadian context, are not seen, is theory. I needed a theory that reflected the financial economies of Black women. So we started off talking in 2016 about the Black social economy. And that eventually emerged into a book in 2018 with some wonderful collaborators. Many of them still belong in the DICE collective. And in this, I call it an emerging theory because it's not finished. I don't think it ever will be finished, but it really does push against this one-dimensional view of Black women on the receiving end of aid. And it draws on Black feminist concepts of lived experience and intersectionality, really honing in on the field of political economy, which is often not citing enough of these Black feminist political economy scholars. And what one learns pretty fast is that there is an abundance of Black political economy out there. The review of Black political economy is an excellent journal for folks to read and can understand how historically oppressed people of African descent have to politicize their networks or their cooperatives below the surface to combat business exclusion. Nina Banks, who's on the bottom photo there of the slide, is a professor and economist at Bucknell University and argues that even within heterodox economics, more progressive feminist spaces, that not enough work has been done to understand the activist or community work of Black women and Latinas in the care economy, which often goes missing. Jessica Gordon-Nembhard, who I draw on a lot of her work, my work builds on her work, has said that African Americans have always been cooperators in that context, but they have had to hide their cooperation, mostly doing it informal because it was viewed as subversive when a bunch of Black folk get together and organize cooperatively. Pan-Africanist leader, who many of you may know in this room, Marcus Garvey, had the world's largest member-owned institution called the UNIA. And the point of his, and as well, a collection of cooperative businesses like black doll making, laundromats, and restaurants when black folk weren't invited or allowed to go into those more mainstream businesses. And his whole point was to promote self-reliance among black folk. But this work that he did was so threatening that he was deported. And so many of you know this truth from the works of Rupert Lewis at the University of West Indies, Keisha Blaine, Tony Martin, and so many others. So what's important to be remembered here is that these banker ladies who organize these cooperative institutions refuse to sit idly by waiting on handouts. They use group consensus, mutual aid to help those who are discriminated against or those who feel like they don't belong anywhere and make them belong somewhere. The work that they do builds up our civic life. Caribbean cooperators like Mummy here, who gives us this quote, is making the point that Susu is the ting. Susu is the one that they can bind and come together, right? What they're creating there are community-driven banks that are very much embedded in trust and reciprocity within the communities they come from. And this kind of work is actually seen in the Caribbean. In Canada, we don't see the cooperators, the cooperative efforts of black folk. We don't see them as being pioneers within this field. But we all know about the Underground Railroad. That was a cooperative network of people who took on a lot of risk to move enslaved people from point A to B. And that was about cooperatively organizing to move those goods and to move people to safety. And if people got to Canada safe enough, what I learned from Brian Prince at Buxton Museum out in southern Ontario towards Windsor is that that there was a system called true bands, and true bands is a form of a ROSCA where people who once they settled in Canada fleeing the US slavery would then tap into cash donations, other in-kind gifts that people would give them so they could start up life in Canada. So we have this history of informality helping people, and very pointedly towards the black experience. Much of Canada has a legacy of informal cooperatives, but we suppress that story. So let me tell you one story that's really important for us to understand, and it helps speak to the larger cooperative sector. In the early 1900s in Lévis, Quebec, there was the formation of these caisses populaires, which are translated as credit unions. And it was done in a moment of crisis when French Catholic Quebecois did not feel like they fit in. They felt that they were excluded by Protestant Anglophones. And so that's why they created these caisses populaires. What these caisses populaires are actually today is part of what we know as the Desjardins movement that has contributed majorly to Quebec's economies sociale. Desjardins is one of the, I think, 5 largest financial institutions in Canada. And Desjardins has informal roots. It started off informally. You would have a caisse populaire, and then you would have an église, a church. When I was an undergraduate student in Halifax, I learned about the Antigonish movement in Nova Scotia. It also started off informally. Fisher folks would gather around kitchen tables. They would talk about a world of cooperativism to contest the spread of commercialized fishing. Then today, what we have at St. FX in the area of Antigonish, specifically the Coady Institute, is an important site for learning about cooperatives coming out of Canada. So international visitors come from all over the global south to learn about that legacy. Yet when we share what we know about cooperativism, we don't teach the world about the black banker ladies and their contributions. And neither do we teach them about the contributions of people of African descent and other global south people who have built things in the world of cooperativism. The Canadian case that I'm studying diverges from the Caribbean, the 300 plus banker ladies, the chief banker ladies that I interviewed, as well as the other field work that I carried out in Ghana and Ethiopia with my colleagues, Sami Bonsu at the University of Ghana. And what I found is that we have these banker ladies living in either the Caribbean or in Ghana and Ethiopia, and they're living in societies where people actually recognize their banker ladies. They appreciate the service that they bring. So for example, when elite capture takes hold and big bosses carry out patronage politics, the partner bank is there to help Jamaicans have an option to opt out of those kinds of politics. When there are issues of racism or any other kind of crisis going on in Trinidad or Guyana, what you see is Susu and Boxhand. So people are seeing and valuing the work of the banker ladies. They don't have to be hiding in any of these Caribbean countries that I studied. Even elite bankers in Jamaica, they'll roll out the partner plan. Banker ladies there will tell you it's not the exact same thing that they're doing, but these banks are savvy because they're trying to mimic a local innovation so that they can get more clientele, right? Haitian bankers at the very prestigious Sogisol Bank have created this Mama Soul product line because they understand people's affinity to African indigenous forms of banking. However, the same kind of recognition of the banker ladies here in Canada is not happening. So the divergence in the Canadian case to the one that I just mentioned, the Caribbean, in these several countries, is not really about the mechanics of how these institutions function. The governance is different no matter where you are. But it's actually in acknowledging that ROSCAs exist. In Canada, we see a spate of Black, Indigenous, and Muslim people, Canadians discriminated against when they go into the banks, commercial banks specifically, to carry out mundane transactions. To respond to these kinds of humiliations and harm, it's the Canadian banker ladies, these cooperators are the ones who are reaching out to affected people. But their work remains ignored, and Canadian ROSCAs remain hidden. So many of the women that I interviewed, and it's good to know who they are and what they do. They're engaged in small catering businesses, school bus drivers, cleaners, retail clerks, grocery store employees. That's pretty much the gist of the kind of work that folks are doing. And during the height of the pandemic, you will remember what we called these women, essential workers. But we don't pay them properly for the work that they do. We keep them precarious. We don't hire them for their community economic development building expertise. Instead, we stigmatize them. We call them terrorists, money launderers, drug mules, pyramid schemers. In Canada, the issue is not only just about not recognizing these women or remunerating them for the actual work they do in community development. The banker ladies in Canada are being vilified. Many banker ladies fear the government and police with good reason. Police will confiscate their goods when they raid their apartment blocks and don't listen to their explanations that the money is being used for a ROSCA to help in local development and that it is a legitimate form of financial cooperation. I think it was back in 2019, just before the pandemic, no, 2018, Esri Mondesir started filming the banker ladies. He's a Haitian Canadian filmmaker, documentarian, and it actually came on the request of the banker ladies. I'm just going to show you a trailer, but it's on Films for Action. It's free. You can share it wherever you like. But it's really because the banker ladies were tired of having these really academic responses to sort of protecting them and to getting word out and to change mindsets, and they thought this documentary could help them. So here's 3 of them.
But also, so if you have it in your country, you still bring it. So when you go, you meet people from your country, you say, oh, you remember Ososo? They say, yes. You remember when we used to do it back home? So why don't we do it back?
So we developed a structure that was different, slightly different than the one that my mom and her friends used.
A youth club means help. When we have a group of 10 of women to $200, I get a $2,000.
That makes me independent. I feel a power. So I have something.
So that's on Films for Action. It's open access on purpose so that we get the story out. And we can thank those banker ladies for making me do that work. I have the least creative bone in me, but we had to make that work happen, and it was released last year. ROSCAs push against this business exclusion. That's what the film will tell you. But it's doing much more than that, and these women will tell you that themselves. It's building friendships and camaraderie. These things don't have to be mutually exclusive, is what I'm learning from them. It's the way that we make business more ethical. One woman in Rexdale confided in me that her election campaign was funded by Ayutu so that she can run against one of the Fords in Etobicoke. And Ayutu is a Somali ROSCA. The other person here is a woman from Brampton, who's actually here in the audience, Andrea Barrett. There she is. She recently let me know that she drew on a Jamaican partner to run for political office. So what we have here are these ROSCA systems, these informal institutions that are being demonized here in the Canadian context, but they're drawing on social capital that is in abundance in communities that are seen as not having very much, right? And they're helping to raise money so that black women, these informal funds are helping black women so that they can participate in a formal political process. Like, that's beautiful. That's beautiful for me as a political science, and I don't know why they're not studying why we need to do more of that. Okay, so I'm just gonna wrap it up. It's no longer reasonable for us to pretend that ROSCAs don't exist or to say that we don't see what these women, the banker ladies, are doing. What these women are doing is using their after-taxed incomes to pool and gift each other funds that they may need to start a new business, that they use to pay the tuition fees of their children, or buy a used car so they can get to work or deliver their inventory somewhere. ROSCAs prioritize the voices of their members. Members' deliberation is key to making people feel valued in the society. And there's nothing illegal about this kind of cooperative work. And the fear-mongering that we put on these women have to stop. So like any other cooperator that we have in this world that are formalized, ROSCA users understand concepts of trust and reciprocity, which are fundamental to rebuilding sustainable, equitable economies. That is why this year, in 2022, the Banker Ladies Council was established. We have a Banker Lady Council member here in the house, and some are online with us, was established. And these members, who many of them throw and participate in these ROSCA systems, are calling for a ROSCA federation that can benefit not just Black and racialized and Indigenous women in the country, but all Canadian women. So, and we don't have to start from scratch, actually. There are proven models in the Global South that recognize ROSCAs, self-help groups, and mutual aid as valuable to society and have incorporated them in their business, in their ecosystems. So, in India, they've had chit funds on the law books since the 1800s. In Ghana, the Susu system has been around for centuries, and they have actually made a small segment of the Susu system as part of their formal financial system. Ghanaians have taken a pragmatic approach to how we regulate. They don't want to surveil the informal sector, but they want to recognize there's such a thing as informal and formal, and we can have both types of Susu systems, which I think is great. And with Sammy Bonsu, we have a publication in the pipeline in Rethinking Marxism that's coming out next year. So, and then finally, in South Africa, there's the National Association of Stokvels. Well, Stokvel is a ROSCA name that they use in South Africa, and they're mainly fighting the attacks that Stokvel users undergo because of commercial banks attacking them. And so they do a lot of capacity building and trying to validate the use of Stokvel systems. So to conclude, the Banker Ladies, through the ROSCA system, has addressed underbanking. They're making sure that we have cohesion in our society. They repair the harms of anti-Black racism and any other kinds of alienation that people find by extending finance to these people, but also kindness and social supports for people who need it most. I hope that this evening, when we're having this conversation, that it just doesn't end here, and that you can all go out there and spread the word about ROSCAs, these informal cooperative systems that are legitimate informal institutions that are democratically controlled, so that we can start moving away from our dependence on corporate individualized forms of finance. So with that, I'd like to end my presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Ebun Joseph, who will also show a parallel story. This is why we are comrades in arms, because we were studying the the development of ROSCA systems, where Black folk are the minority in much of the global north. And she's going to tell you a story of the system of Ajo in Dublin, Ireland. Thank you very much for your time.
So much now I have to follow Caroline. Can you imagine that? Like she's been doing this for many years. So just whatever you say, just take it from me like that, okay? But it's so exciting to be here, and thanks to the BRN. I'm really excited that you made it possible for me to be here. And Caroline, thanks for inviting me as well. And this is a conversation we have offline. We have it every time we see. We were having lunch today, and we're having a conversation. We have to go. We'll be sitting down here. We'll be talking for so long, like we have to go. And the time just flew by. We didn't know when 2 hours went by. Like, we have to go now. And so that is interesting. Wait, I lose my mic? I think on the side.
How's that?
Okay. Can you hear me? Perfect. Sorry. See, I like talking, and all my adrenaline is flowing again, and I've lost my mic. But yeah, so it's exciting to be here and to be part of this conversation. And I hope that we can get to even half of what Canada is doing. So you guys are really amazing. Like I see the amazing work. I'm like, God, when are we going to get there in Ireland? But we're organizing. We're having those talks, and we can see. So what I'm going to try and bring to you. I think I took out the first one just to show you the presence of Black people in Ireland, because when people think of Ireland, if I was to do a test and ask you to describe, the typical, Irish person, what would you say if I was to ask, Ireland? If you think of Ireland, who would you expect to see? Red hair. Red hair, absolutely. What else? Red hair. What else would you expect them to look like? Blue-eyed, yes. How else would you expect them to be? Pale, white. Yeah, So, and those are the first things that come to us. But Ireland is looking like me now. I'm Irish. I have 2 boys that are 20 and 18, and they're Irish. When they go to Nigeria, they're going on holiday. Yeah. I was trying to get them to go. Last year, So for them, it's holiday. They're going to visit their granddad. So for them, Ireland is home, and not just my kids. We have so many. Then we have the Black and Irish. There's a podcast we have in Ireland. It's called Black and Irish, and the podcast started in the middle of. If you're on Instagram, you can follow them, and you can get a lot of Irish news. But they started just in the middle of the COVID, and within 2 months, the total number of Black and Irish went to 20,000. So everybody started like, what's this happening? What's happening here? And that's just to show. And every time they showcase, young Black people who are Black and Irish mixed race, and it's just exciting to see doing amazing things. 2 weeks ago, and one of the things, and I'm saying this because it's one of the fights that I have, in Ireland, because we constantly get told, oh, Black people are new to Ireland. I'm like, no, they've been there. They've been there, and we have, we call him the youngest. He's the youngest, Black of us, but he's mixed race. He's 80, he's 81 now. He was born in Ireland. We had when we introduced them Black History Month, when we launched Black History Month last month in October, he was one of my speakers because we launched it, and he was one of the speakers on my panel. He was 81, so I had 4 generations, Black people who were born in Ireland, living in Ireland, grew there, Black. So just in case you still have that thing on your mind, no, they look like me as well, So I don't have the slides on anymore, so I've just told you, so that piece is done. But then, just how we operate Ajo Osusu in Dublin, in Ireland, you'd think that it was something that, from Africa. You don't have that kind of thing in Ireland. Come on, we have modern day banking. So why would you have that there? But again, it's interesting to see that, these cultures, they follow us, and how can we really maximize it? Is it a culture? Is it a cultural thing that should be minimized? Because again, and I'll tell you some of my work around racial stratification, and is this racial order where something that is not within the Western system, no matter how good it is, no matter how much value we say it's adding to people, we can actually show you that it's adding value to people. is actually, some of them described it as rescue. When somebody says something rescued me, then shouldn't we pay attention? The Thomas theorem says if somebody tells something is important, then it is. That's what it is. So if we tell you that this thing rescued them, shouldn't we give it value? Shouldn't we stop and pay attention that this group of people who are saying that I felt rescued, that's not a word you use lightly. Was when we finished the interviews, I was looking back, I was like, rescue, that's such a strong word to use. But that's how they felt. It was something they could rely on. It was something that was reliable. And it's an intangible thing. And today we can't even find friends and family that we can rely on. And then for people to say there is a system that met them at their lowest ebb, that met their need, it just begs that, there must be attention paid to it. I've never done ROSCAs. So it was interesting, So for me, I've always known about it. They always ask me to do it. I just never do it. Because I'm good at saving. Do you understand? I'm very good at saving, So I just felt I never needed it because I could save on my own. I could save for anything. I saved for my mortgage. I could save for anything. I'm really disciplined in that, so that I'm fortunate. So I save on my own, so I didn't need that system. But we're saying that we're all so different. Look at our hands. We're all so different. And so there's a group of people that this meets their need. And that if we're talking about an inclusive society, we'll keep talking about this equality. And we keep saying equality breeds inequality. It's equity. Equity is what when you treat equality, people say you treat everyone the same. I'm like, no, you create more inequality. So every time you do equality, you are creating inequality. It sounds like, no, that's wrong. It is absolutely right. So what we need is equity. Equity is where you give people what they need. Equality is giving everybody shoes. Equity is giving them their shoes, size 8, size 9, size 10. That's equity. I could just go to the shop and just buy size 10. Buy one, get one free. I love buy one, get one free. Say, buy one, get one free. Yeah, just size 10. Give everybody, one for everybody in the audience. It's of no use to you. You can't even give it to your kid because they don't even wear size 10. That's what equality does. It gives us things we don't need. And people are saying, we need Ajo, we need Osusu. It's working for us. It's helping us. And we're not supporting that kind of work. We said that an African is not just an individual. It's a person within a community. And so that we are part of this Western world. Now, we're individualized in the Western world. But within the African community, we are not individualistic. We don't operate as individuals. Even as much as we try and, even still today, you can still, I don't know how many of my white friends, you can go and say, I'm kind of short on my mortgage, can I? You can't even voice it. But I can get black folks who can come and ask me that. Yeah? Yeah. Because, we're connected. If I'm not okay, you're not okay. It's still the Ubuntu thing. It still works. It's still Ubuntu. That's, when I did the research we did, there was such a massive pull on Ubuntu. It was that community. They expect you to feel what they feel. My white folks say, go to social welfare if you're not okay. Black folks say, we see what we can do. We gather together. We put some money together for you. We make you okay. When you're okay, we're all okay. We do that. That's what we do. You come for our parties. You ever been to any of our parties before? We give you doggy bag when you're going. Not for your dog, for you. That's your breakfast tomorrow. You came for dinner, we're giving you breakfast. That's community. And it's a good thing. And that's what these cooperatives do. It's a carry-on, it's a flow. It's a flow of that community that we see. So we say that we're not individuals, but a person within a community. This is my book, Critical Race Theory. And why I bring that in to introduce, is to introduce this idea of stratification, that there is a racial order. You know, I really wanted to understand why in the Western world, wherever you go, whether you're in Canada, in Toronto, or you're in Dublin, or you're in London, or you're in Paris, or even in Lagos, you'll be amazed to find that even in Lagos, the black person is at the bottom of the ladder, the white person is at the top of the ladder. So I said, there must be something wrong. Either there's something wrong with the black person, or there's a system that allows us to perpetuate and reproduce whiteness at the top and blackness at the bottom. I really wanted to understand why. So my whole thesis was around that. And I investigated, and for me, what came out is that there is a racial order, there's a racial strata. I will ask us this question. Come back to this. In Ireland, I can just quickly say, in Ireland, the unemployment rate, and this was part of the thing that also helped me, get mad enough to want to see, like, why, what's happening here? In Ireland, the unemployment rate of Western Europeans, pre-COVID-19, that was, 2016, because we had to move our census now. We've only just done it because of COVID, we couldn't do it. So the closest census we have from that, pre-COVID-19, the Western Europeans, the unemployment rate was 4.8 to 9.8% for Western Europeans. For Eastern Europeans, it was 13 to 17%. For Black Africans, it was 43 to 63%. So 1.25 of every black person you see in Ireland was unemployed. Now, don't get me wrong, not that they didn't have right to work. Because when we start talking of unemployed, they say, asylum seekers. I'm like, no, stop. They are citizens. They have the right to work. They have some form of permit. So they have the right to work, but the system is closed and does not allow them to navigate the system. And so this is something that helps you to begin to see. So if you see the way I analyzed it, it helps you begin to see the racial strata. When you say immigrants, when you don't disaggregate that data, you say immigrants, unemployment rate for immigrants in Ireland is 15%. But you can't see this if you look at immigrants. So you have to break it down in your work, in your analysis, in understanding. And so that's what the piece of work I did. And so it began to show me something. If I ask us a quick question, that all those, lovely, amazing women at the bottom of this ladder, trying to get to the top, the academic in me, trying to get to the top, senior lecturer, head of department, associate, do you think they can all achieve that goal? Anybody think they can achieve it? Show of hands. I think they can't achieve it. Why do we think they can achieve? Now, some people didn't answer. No for either way. I don't think. Who thinks they can't achieve it? Who thinks they can? Okay. Anybody who thinks why do you think they can achieve it? Come on. Anybody think they can achieve it? Yeah? Why?
Because they're highly skilled.
What?
Because they're skilled.
Yeah, that's what should be, right? That's what Martin Luther was looking for. If you're highly skilled, you get a job. But he still died for it, so something didn't happen, right? That's it. They are highly skilled. So, and it's a ladder. It's put one foot in front of the other. There's no obstacle on the ladder, right? So you should achieve it. So that's the myth. The myth is that we assume this is what we see. My work began to show that the labor market is not like that. This is how the labor market looks. This is how our society looks. It's not what you see. This is how it is. That we all don't start at the same point. Some piece is missing from that, my thing there. Because that girl at the end there, she's a black girl. I think she's not even on the ladder. She was in a hole. So she first has to come out from the hole. When she comes out from the hole, before she starts climbing the ladder. And so those are all the things that have put her in the hole. Racial stratification, racism, bias, microaggression, taste-based racism. Those are all the things that have put her in the hole. Not herself, not because she doesn't have the education. So you can see education is not even one of those things because she's educated, she's a master's holder, she has a PhD. Two. These are not hearsays, I'm like proper real life, people with 2 PhDs. I'm like, who does that? Who has to, one is mad, it was Gaga doing one. Who does 2 PhDs? Who does 2 undergraduate degrees? Black people. 2 undergraduate degrees. I know so many. 2 masters, 3 masters. You know that man, Bernard Malu, the guy who did them concussion. He has like 6 or something PhDs. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Do you know? But we do that because we have a system that tries to keep you out. So we try and find a way to navigate the system. And we try and find the area of least resistance. We try and find a way to overqualify, to get the same things that are given to people. And so we find ways to do that work. But I will get up, because this is my favorite subject. So I'm going to get off the subject and get on my topic, right? So when we began to look at, this whole idea of Osusu, and Ajo, we call it different names, in the western part of Nigeria, among the Yoruba people, they call it Ajo, for those who are in the northern part, it's called Adashe, and for the Igbos, they call it Esusu, or the Edo variant. Any Edo person here? The Edo people call it Osusu. So it's like Esusu, Osusu, so, like variants of the same thing, I only ever knew it as Ajo. I've always known Ajo from growing up. It's, it's something in the fact, and everybody does it, and do that kind of saving, But why, when you look at, I was beginning to wonder, like, what's the connection between, the racial stratification and, Ajo for us in Dublin? That lack of opportunities. If you don't have a job, that means you have no bank records. So that means you have no credit rating. So that means you can't get a loan. Even a 5,000 loan to buy a car, to take your kid to school. And a car is not a luxury. As a parent, it's a necessity. And so the migration we had into Ireland, we have a lot of single parents raising children alone. So imagine raising 3 children on your own. It's madness without a car. It's suicide, in fact. If you're trying to raise 3 kids without a car, how do you get them to football, basketball, and basketball mom? Sometimes I'm picking my kid at 10 p.m. It's not a luxury. So having a car is not so, but you don't have a job. So you can't get a loan. So you can't get a car. So your kid can't have the quality of life. Yes, they are living abroad, but they can't have the quality of life. You can't, they have to go on a school trip for in school, and it's 600 euros. You don't have a car, you don't have a job. You can't afford 600 euros. But your kid is the only one who doesn't go. Mom, why am I the only one who doesn't go? So you get that long face all weekend. As a parent, it just breaks your heart. When they say uniform free day, anybody know uniform free day? We in Ireland, we have what we call uniform free day, where you don't, you pay 2 euros, and yes. And then you're the only one who stop it. You just want to say, stop it. I can't be the only one who my kid can't afford 2 euros, But so many people can't because of the system. And so Ajo came and rescued many of them because they could save for specific things. I remember, I talked about food, and that, if I'm not okay, you are not okay. And that whole system, and that's what the whole system that they found helped them to operate. The history, when we talk about, things like Ajo, Susu, while it is not accepted within the mainstream, it's not new. And that's where that racial order comes in. This racial order, who has the right to be creative? Who has the right to initiate a system? Who has a right to establish something for others to follow? So even while we're telling you that it's okay, it's working, it's helping us, it gets no support. Why? Because you're not in a position to generate ideas. And that's that racial order. Some people at the top, some people at the bottom. But in Ireland, we have what we call we still have the credit unions still today. We still have them. When I first got into Ireland, the first thing they told me is, if you want to buy a house, just keep putting little monies into the credit union, after 5 years, and I stop it. But they say after 5 years, you can then go to the bank and you get 5 times what you've put in. And it's the interest they charge you is little. When you want to go on holiday, you can, save for holidays. So they do all that in the credit union. And it's a legal system within the system there. So these are, So they've done that. We even have the Irish agricultural cooperatives. This was for many years, years ago in Ireland, where the older, they felt that the richer people, could, invest more to help the poorer people. So all of those, kinds of work have been done. Even now, we have what we call Christmas savings. Places like Tesco's, our Tesco's will be like our central shop, encourage you, to come and save for your turkeys. You can come every Friday because we have a social welfare system and people get paid on Friday, Thursday, Friday. So, you can come and put 2 bobs, a little bit apart to save for your Christmas turkey. But it's really at the end of the day, who has the right to generate knowledge? Who should we hear? Who should we support? And it's that inequality within the system. It's not because Ajo Osusu is a bad thing, but it's who has that right. Again, it comes back down to that. In Ireland, what I did was, because I had not done Osusu, but I had a very good friend who done it. Her mom was a chief Osusu, like senior brother. If there's anything like called senior brother of Osusu, her mom, still alive today, her mom still does her job till tomorrow. Like, she's a mark. Oh, rest her soul. No, she died. She died. Her mom died. Yeah, but her mom did her job, for such a long time, So I got a friend, so we both researched it together. We interviewed 10 women, who are done. So we put a call out, say, have you ever done a job? So please, we want to interview you and whatever what you. And we got people. I was surprised. I was like, you guys are doing it in Dublin here. I was surprised. I was like, oh my God, you're doing it in Dublin? They say, yeah. How long? People have been doing it for 12 years. Some people, since the day they came in, they've been doing Osusu. Some people, they've been in Ireland 20 years. They've been doing Osusu 20 years. I said, really? Are you still doing it? Do you still need it? No, but I'm still doing it. Do you understand? They don't need that savings because now they are well established in their job. Yet they are still doing it. So what were they getting out from it? The connections. Helping another person, an opportunity. Say, because if I do this Osusu, I can help them in a legal way. That I don't have to loan you the money and drag you to pay me. But through the Osusu, I can give you the money and the Osusu will make you pay me back the money. Do you understand? So it was a legal way of helping people without having to fight with them when they can't pay you back. Because the Osusu system helps them to pay you back. Do you understand? So there were 4 systems we found out, because I like to understand systems, So when they finished talking, I said, okay, this system was different from this. So there were 4 from all the conversations we had that I discovered. So one of them is what continuous. That's a regular one we know, where, you either contribute a specific amount weekly, monthly, or yearly, That's, we have one for taxi drivers. I found so many, taxi drivers do the continuous one as well, because, taxi, their monies come, the way it is, Then we have what we call unstructured. So unstructured is really one person, who has, a good pot of money. Maybe somebody who's wealthy, you got job, in the bank, the money in your bank, you get 0.001% interest when it's in your bank. So it's useless to you. So, but you can loan it out through this Osusu system, even for 1%, interest. You're doing a good deed, but you're also getting 1% back, which is better than 0.001. The bank is using our money, and you're getting nothing. So this is the unstructured. So what they do is one person who has good pot of money loan to others. That's the unstructured. Then I saw another one which was called intermittent. This is contributions around events like special days like weddings. My daughter is getting married in December. So they say I will collect in December because you know what I mean by collect, right? When they gather the pot together, theirs will be in the December because their daughter is getting married and they need to spend money. So they can collect those things around Christmas, around, those kind of special kind of days. So that was what we call the intermittent. And then the blind format, the blind format one was interesting because here the contributors had never met each other. So it was actually one person who was triggered, because she had like a credit card, that went haywire. So the credit card bill was increasing. The first time you get your credit card, you think it's free money. Don't you realize? No. They collect interest on these things. And when the interest overtakes you, it overtakes you. So she and a few people who had credit cards that were bad, she got them together to now start doing collection to pay off the credit card, thing. So that was so it was but these people didn't know each other. She was the central person. So that's the blind format. But what happened after that was, when they finished with the credit card, then they went on to, so she did a course, and then she began to teach them about, investing, in property, so collecting to invest in property and all of that. So that's the blind format where you're trying to, use that to do. So those are the 4 different types that we saw in, this is just an example of participants' stories. One of them said, I found that many of the members of our Susu group will not be giving loans even if they apply. Even if they apply, we will not tick the boxes. That's the banks, give you money when you don't need it. Every time I open my email, do you want to buy a car? Come and take a loan. I said, I don't need a loan. But they beg you to come take a loan, isn't it? They beg you to come remortgage your house. I'm like, I don't need a loan. They give you money when you don't. The most annoying thing I found was, there was a time when I started my PhD, I was really broke because I was getting separated. So I was now parenting alone, and I'd reduced my hours at work to give me time to do my PhD. And I was funding my PhD by myself, and I had a mortgage, 2 young boys, and I was separated. Right at the beginning of my PhD, I was like, I'm not dropping this thing. That was a liar. I'm like, I'm not stopping this thing. But, I was really broke, at the beginning of my PhD. And I found out that, before then, of course, I had my job, was paying, I wasn't paying bank charges. So the time I was brokest the most was when the bank began to charge me. So for all the, all the direct debits, the bank was now charging me for those things. A few years later, when I don't need that money, like, you could charge me for stuff. They said, no, you have above this amount in your account, so we will give you free banking. I'm like, no. Well, okay, I like the free banking, but you understand what I'm saying? When you don't need it is when you get it. I didn't need it then. I could afford them to take the money. When I needed, like, 10 euros meant a lot to me at that time. Don't take my 10 euros. And they were taking it, 15 euros, 20 euros, because I have all the direct debits come from my account. Do you understand? And so you find that so you say, so that, they give that, that's what she meant, that they give you money when you don't need it. That's what she meant, and I could really relate with it because, and I told her my story after, but they are not there to save you on the rainy day, so far as you can pay your contribution, we don't need to know your banking history. So that trust, that freedom, it's all there. And that's a matter of training. She was an accounting personnel. This is another person, she said, I observed my father, who dealt with the bank, constantly going to the bank and bank managers coming to him. I thought it was for people like my dad. I had no investment or regular income. I also knew banks didn't give much interest, so why put my money in the bank? So she was one of those who was, loaning to other people because, she felt, the banks don't give you much interest. They've never even done anything for me. It's people like my dad, her dad was quite wealthy, My mother, on the other hand, has done this over 40 years, and she never dealt with the bank in her daily business in the open market where she's a trader. So her mother too was a banker lady, She loans to people, and she will go around. And the interesting thing is that, the mother knew everybody. She knew everybody's business. Yeah. She cared about not just knowing their business for her business, but, okay, so how is your business doing now? She would give them advice. Do you understand? So are you making money? She would give them advice. It was just, and that's why maybe when we start having this conversation, Caroline, I want to, is there no value in that? Because, when you get, financial advisors, these people serve as financial advisors. And it's coming back to this thing of who has the right to have rights even. We say citizenship is your right to have rights. At what point are these amazing people who are holding our, people together, at what point are they going to have rights to have rights, I'm just going to quickly show us this because I think we want to have just a quick conversation, but, can also make money inclusive, So in the way that, women are, that it's a way for women to counteract exclusion and access financial resources. So that exclusion, it can be inclusive. So money can be made, helps to make money inclusive, to have their own autonomy in a society where blacks are engaged in menial work, undervalued, or still viewed as strange. So it helped them, in that way. Making money is inclusive. Making money inclusive is making our systems inclusive. So I think that's really important, that if you want to make money inclusive, then the system itself must be inclusive. We keep talking about systems. The money that helps the systems to flow has to be inclusive in itself. And I think that those are thoughts that we need to put on the table and look at. It also offers a form of loan without interest charges, and just, some of the key things, that are there. So how participants, so they develop some competency like accountabilities, where some key things they developed as well. It helped them to, they developed, it compels them to meet their obligations, So even compared, so one of them said that compared to banks, banks put all the penalties, you will get, your credit rating will go down, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't compare people, they still default. But, they felt more compulsion to meet Osusu, so that Osusu had something that, banks can have, and, so savings alone did not, enforce that kind of discipline that they had, But I liked, that, inclusive money means that, but I like the last one. They were felt rescued by Osusu. They felt rescued, Imagine being able to make you to provide the 600 euro for your child to go on their school trip. It rescued you. Being able to buy the, Xbox that your child needs for Christmas, you felt rescued. Being able to get the 5,000 to buy your car. You're able to take your kids to school and all their sports games, they felt rescued, and those are the kind of things, that they felt, happened to them. Just, my last slide here, I'm just saying again, I'm reminding of, so just in preparing for this was what struck me, when I was preparing that, making money inclusive is making systems inclusive, so that's just a conversation I think I want to just try and dig deeper into. How can we make money more inclusive, of people? Yeah, thank you.
So I think now what we're going to do is just have about, about 15 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to the group. So I think we started having this conversation, I think, about a couple of years ago, Ebun and myself, thinking through what does ROSCAs look like outside of the Americas? And I think that that's where we started our conversation. Because I knew she was doing some work on racial stratification, unemployment of Black women in the Dublin context. But I was also curious to, well, what do women do when they can't access formal systems? I think we already had a conversation that there's some parallels between Canada and Ireland, where we're situated next to big powers, right? And there's an important history on guilds in Ireland or cooperative institutions. Canada has that same legacy with the Desjardins or the social economy and various types of credit unions, but they seem to still be a marginal type of banking institution. And I'm not sure why these ROSCA systems, and I only learned this when I went to Maynooth last year, that I realized interacting with some of the ladies you work with, that they also hide their Isuzu system. And I'm wondering, this idea of hiding or keeping it below the surface, when these two countries have a legacy of cooperativism, how do we now start finding the right partners who are in the formal banking system, maybe credit unions or cooperatives, so that these systems don't have to be hidden anymore?
I think it's just, that, and I think, for me, every time I open my mouth, they're like, oh, but we're going to change your name to racial stratification, because everything just runs back down to racial stratification. There is a racial order. It's that racial order. It's a system of operation. And that's the system that, that controls how we do things, where people land on that system, And so you look at the fact that, all the different resources that are there, all the different opportunities that are there, who has that right, to have access to that resource, So you begin to look at all of those, you begin to look at all of those things and the different changes that it makes. So, for example, you find that, a lot of the African women in Dublin, even when they've bought their cars, even when they've had to live frugally, to save. So don't forget that they have no income. So some of them are on social welfare. So, or maybe they are doing plaiting hair or whatever they generate any income. Now they will have to live frugally, to save the money, to be able to buy a car. When they are going to social welfare, they have to either walk to social welfare, park their car a good distance away so that the welfare officer doesn't see that they own a car. Because it's not like you can afford a car, you have a car, then you have another source of income. Well, so all of those kind of systems, of trust, mistrust, So I talk about, social capital, Some people have social capital that, I automatically assume you can speak English. I automatically assume you are trustworthy. But some other people, I automatically assume that, no, you're a liar. I automatically assume that I need to police you. Do you see? So it's that racial order where people they feel they have to police you. They have the right to police you beyond what other people are doing. And so that's where you begin to see a lot of these systems. That it's not as straightforward or as, that as we see them, that these underlying things, come into play, to impact on just their, on all of those systems. So yes, until we begin to crack all the systems, and I think that's why I'm just really amazed at the work that you guys are doing here, pushing for the council, because that's that you're beginning to have a voice. You're beginning to organize, And
a lot of that voice for the council came out of harm, right? So there's a lot of violence that's happening when Black women choose, and there's folks, hopefully you'll talk about it too in the audience. There's a banker lady on the council here, but a lot of that came out of violence. You can work with people who are in these communities organizing and doing all these things on their own self-help in their own terms, but they live in environments where there's constantly harms happening. And because of their cooperation informally. And either they're seen as subversive, or it might be just because of the structural or the systemic issues that are happening. So there was no choice for the banker ladies to say, we need to collaborate. I mean, what good is my research and holding these research chairs if my research can't create practical change on the communities that I care about, right? Like, how good is that research if we can't actually change mindsets? And that was the idea with those banker ladies and their film, because I was like, no way I'm making a film. I don't even know anything about doing a film. I'm a researcher. I do data and I analyze it and I do theory and then that's it. And they're like, well, then that's useless because that's actually not going to bring change. And we need you to start educating people about how the work we do is not unlike the formal cooperative sector. And I was like, oh, bingo. So what they're saying is that these capitalist systems that strive on individuality, because that's not how they're operating, is harming us because we choose these kinds of models. But what if we can now start being recognized for the kind of development we do? How do we do that in a way that, one, we get remunerated? Like, we should be hiring these women. I mean, at first I thought, well, it's because they're so informal, and maybe we need to unpack that. Because informal here in the Canadian, probably in the Dublin context, is seen as dodgy, particularly if Black folk do it. But Black people here know that Little India, Indian Bazaar, Chinatown, those funds were collectively organized. They couldn't get loans either, but they were able to build. So the Banker Lady Council had to be created. And so we have done it. And thankfully, the Cooperators Group actually gave us our first tranche of money. And they basically said, go have a bunch of meetings, pay those women to come to those meetings like you would a consultant, and make them work as consultants. And so that's the meetings we do. I pay them well, as I would pay anyone else. And we sit there and we think about policy making. we have had, usually I start meetings for 2 or 3 hours. I think they never end shorter than 5 or 6 hours, but it's because of the policy making. They're passionate about this. They want to see a structural change in the financial ecosystem to be more inclusive. And so now we've gotten to a point at the end of the summer to create a ROSCA federation. And I was like, we were playing around, is it going to be a network? Is it going to be this? And people were very adamant that there's something member owned. There's something about having a membership or a collective that seems more closer aligned to the work they're doing as opposed to commercial banks. So that's where we are as the Banker Ladies Council. I feel like I'm more of a scribe with them working through these ideas, but now the plan is now they're running around in their own communities creating these kind of town hall sort of community banking capacity building workshops where they're going out and they're actually communicating to other banker ladies in their communities about what is it that we're going to do, and now what does it mean to be a federation, and who's going to finance that and work with us to do that. So now the plan is to kind of figure out who are the big credit unions that care about racialized people. How do we grow the cooperative sector, banking sector?
But what I think is so amazing about this work that you're doing, right? So that I'm not fangirling you, right? But what I think is so amazing about this work is that you're doing what we actually expect researchers to do. And that is to go to the people you're researching as the resource, as the answers. So they are actually giving you the answer to their problems, so that you're not telling them this is what we're going to do for you. Mm-hmm. You know, they are coming up with saying this is the problem, but you're facilitating. You know, sometimes you're so close to your problem you can't see it, right? But you've been able to facilitate with them. You know, to be able to say, you know what, we can look at it in this way, and they're actually coming up with solutions. And I just think that's really amazing, like something that hopefully we can pick up, learn some more of these, and take some of these back to Dublin.
Well, I think that's why we have to follow on with this work. And I keep saying that there's something in the future for between Ireland and Canada, and we can learn from you as well, because I think that there are certain things that you guys are doing that's very interesting in terms of the AJO system. But I do think that those women have changed me as a researcher, because I used to think my work is just benign, economic, feminist research, and it's here on the side. But when you start seeing the filth and the harms happening every single day in the violence, it's unbelievable. Our work has been on pause because of one of our banker ladies endured an extreme form of violence, right? Her son was murdered due to gun violence in her arms. I mean, that's the pain that resides on our council. I hate to say, but I fall apart every time, because these are the women that I work with. And they keep saying to me, we have to keep doing it, because we have to start seeing us as community economic development experts and stop just relegating us to the sidelines, because we're doing that work every day. And everyone just wants them to work in the grocery stores or clean their houses, and they're like, that's not what I do. I'm a banker lady. And I'm like, yeah, you are. So we have to figure out, how do we remunerate you properly, and how do we get the state to start financing for a ROSCA federation? And that's where we're stuck, because I feel like I'm this like banker lady researcher, and that's all I'm obsessed with. So right now, I think the people who are the good guys in the banking system, and they're not perfect, but I do think it's credit unions and cooperatives that I think we're going to hang our hat with this ROSCA system. Because and then it's not that they want to be absorbed by them. They want them to guide them to have some sort of support, because that's a part of the cooperative value system, is to help other cooperatives.
Because it is important that happens, because like when you start talking of bigger numbers, you're not going to be keeping the money in a shoebox, So that means there's a form of a hierarchy of banking, or a system of banking, a relationship, a mutually respecting relationship that is there, that needs to be explored by the the standardized banking systems that are there, because these monies that are being collected are passed through the banking system. I remember one, took the money to the bank, and, of course, they almost called the police on her, like, where did you get this kind of money, and blah, 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 all of those kind of things, so all of those, again, it's back to my racial order, how do you have this money? Do you have the right to have this kind of money? The people are looking at, how are you here? And you see, you can read the look, you can see that, you get on some sections, people are looking at you, can I see your ticket again? I'm like, is there special people who should have this kind of tickets? It's like, you shouldn't be in this section, you should be on that section. I said, no, I just enjoy just shocking people. So I'm, so all of those kind of things, and so, yeah. So I think that there is that, natural line that should happen there. Because don't forget that these monies that are collected is going to go into the system, unless, we're talking of parallel systems where is in a shoebox, inside the house.
I think the ROSCA Federation, their ideas, and it's still not finalized because we're on pause right now, but I do think what the last, and Andrea might want to come in at some point in the conversation, I think the idea is that a ROSCA Federation is almost like an apex institution, and it's valuing the informality of all these groups everywhere. Like, it's saying that you're allowed to operate informally. We're not opposed to that, and that's okay, but we are going to stop the harm, so at least you're recognized. So that if police go into Dixon apartments and raid Somali apartments or Nigerian apartments or whoever the cultural group is, and they use the local vernacular, that it's no longer going to be like, oh, that's drug money. Oh, that's for some sort of, funding of Al-Shabaab. Like, I mean, all of that stuff has to stop. And I think the Federation will, one, educate, but it will also be that go-to point. Like, so when ROSCA groups, they may need training on governance, because everyone needs help on governance. But if we're linked as a federation to other credit unions or the Cooperative and Credit Union Association of Canada, that they put on all these kinds of governance trainings so they can support ROSCA members to have some sort of recognition, not surveillance, because the bank ladies are clear. We like informality. It's good. But if in the future, there are younger people who do these ROSCAs and they're doing it online. They're like, oh my God, we're having so much stressors, because once you go online to do it, then you need some sort of formality with the state to recognize that peer-to-peer lending institutions online by kids of color is okay, And so that's what the ROSCA Federation would do. It would work on the policy, educating.
And advocacy. So making sure that you have somebody in your corner if there's a problem. We've heard stories where you're going into a bank, and just like you said, where did you get this money? We need to hold this money, or we don't have the right account set up for it. So when Dr. Hossein's talking about credit unions, we like credit unions because we feel they understand, they're more sympathetic to newer immigrants or startups or people just getting started. But advocacy is important. There are apps that are being created. Some people still have problems going to the bank. I went to the bank today to deposit money into somebody else's account in a different bank, and it took too long, asking me too many questions. Oh, do you know you'll be charged $20 for every 1,000 you put in? I'm like, well, it's your bank. Whatever it is you're doing, you're doing. But I'm sure a credit union, if they understood ROSCAs and what we're doing, wouldn't be as difficult as it is. But I think education, very important. Educating the law enforcement, educating police. If you go and find X amount of thousands of dollars, it's not drug money. It's someone's hand. Someone's saving up for a down payment or a wedding or something like that. So education and advocacy and just support.
Can we open it up to more
Yeah,
questions?
sure. And we have someone here from Meridian, actually. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am so glad that someone from a credit union is here, and it just kind of speaks volumes. And I have to say, the Cooperators Group was one of the ones, it's a major insurer in Canada, but they're like, no, we want to invest in the banker ladies to be able to have and convene these sessions, because maybe there's a space in our financial ecosystem for these kinds of financial groups, right?
Other questions or comments? We got a mic.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It really has been phenomenal, and kudos to you for your work and the nature of research. On the level of methodology, the fact that the research isn't extractive, it's actually participatory. It seeks to reveal findings and promote those findings through a collaborative process, and I think that's tremendous for both of you. And I'm really thrilled to be here to participate. I wanted to push somewhat on the distinction between formality and informality, because I actually don't think it helps the argument that you're building, and in fact, much of the conceptualization around these different bodies that you're terming informal are actually quite formalized. They're quite structured. They have their logics. And one of the problems when we render through this, when the state renders them informal, it dismisses them as having an inner logic and a sense of responsibility and obligation, and and forms of reciprocity that are part of the inner workings of it. And so I wonder if your invocation of whether your invocation of it is their language, your language, is it just some slippage, or are there ways that you together collaboratively are trying to push beyond those distinctions?
Yeah, I'm glad. Thank you, Professor, for asking that question. Informality, formality is one that generates a lot of, discussion and debate among banker ladies, here, elsewhere. And you're right, the governance structures are quite sophisticated in that there is a lot of, whether you call it formality, ways in which they decide how to structure these institutions. But I think that some of the women, there's at least a hardcore third of the people that I'm interviewing that are really proud of their institutions being viewed as non-formal. So whether that's informal or non-formal, they're trying to make it clear that they're distinct enough from formal cooperative institutions. I'm sort of playing, I can't get any consensus on that. There's major debate on that. Younger generations want to see more formality in a more mainstream sense of what formality looks like. That's why we're looking outside of Canada, because Ghana has really done great work. And one of my grad students is here who's done a lot of that research, Amadou Mutaro, who I should have said, he did a lot of the research on looking at the Global South institutions that are thinking about formality and informality. And Ghana, where he's from, they actually have been playing with informal and formal. But informal not in a way, and I think the pandemic is helping us. When I used to do the same research and talk about informality, people did not like it. They thought it was dodgy work. Big professors, academics, policymakers would be like, these women, why would they do this in Toronto, Montreal? We're saturated with all kinds of alternative banks. They must be up to no good if they choose this informal, and we're using the language of informality, right? And they insist on using their cultural names, like regardless of, and that's why we're having a hard time choosing a name for the Banker Ladies Council, because everyone likes the informal type of language. So I'm starting to go there too, that we just say all of them and have the world figure out what they mean. Because if you say susu, then Somalis are like, How about hagbad? If you say that, the Nigerians are like, this is ajor. Like everyone has their own personal affiliation. So this kind of, Ghana has put on a response that we will have both. We will make it informal and we will make formal. And that's just how the world is operating. The pandemic, what I was saying has made my work easier. And this is very strange because, and maybe not to the audience here, but I think it's very interesting in that because now we see informal not as a bad thing. Ella Batt, who just passed away, she was the head of SEWA, the Self-Employment Employed Women's Association, just passed away. They had like 30 million members in their association, mostly self-help groups in India. She just passed away. I think it was like last week or the week before last. And her whole thing, her last book that she wrote on the Sewa system was that, you know, these informal institutions across India are actually these traditional systems that we need to make vibrant in our society, because the lines of informality and formality is so problematic. It's more convenient for those who are vested in profit making. So these commercialized types of businesses want formality. But it's okay if there are some within the informal sector who want to register and be more formal and play that game, that's great. But what we do have to do is make more space in our economy to recognize mutual aid, recognize ROSCAs, recognize self-help groups. And what happens to the cooperative world, and this even makes the cooperative world uncomfortable because much of it is formal. But they don't realize that they can grow their cooperative world, so we don't have to be so stuck on commercial kinds of banking that do things one way. So I guess what I'm saying in a roundabout way is that the dichotomy of formal and informal is not is difficult for us to navigate as a group. I don't find any consensus with banker ladies in Canada. Actually, in Africa, in Ghana, in Ethiopia, they don't even understand why we're having this conversation on formal and informal, because it's not as stigmatized. They don't see themselves as doing resistance quite in the same way. So, and then here, you know, it's so messy in terms of whether we do formal or informal. I'm at the stage where I'm thinking informality is okay. We just have to bring the rest of society along with us. And I think the pandemic is helping us to do that, because at the low points in our society, when things shut down, who's there? The best stories that came out of that pandemic were people coming out of the woodworks to help each other informally. We need to save that. That's a good thing. So that's where we're at. And, you know, I don't know, I was like, maybe we need to think about formality, but it's messy. And maybe this is why it's taking me 11 years to write this, this book, because it's so, I feel still unfinished yet, or I'm not letting it go. But that's part of the issue with this story.
But when you talk about naming, you
Yeah.
know, when you talk about naming, as you were talking, I was thinking, you say, but think about it. So let me use Ireland, because I know the names of the banks in Ireland. So let's talk about naming, you know, Ajo, Susu. Why can't we have all of them in one city? Because say for example, in Ireland now we have like 6 banks.
Yeah.
They all don't have the same name. They all don't have the same principles of operation. But they have different names. But we know that they are banks. We have Bank of Ireland, AIB, Permanent TSB. Different names. Why is it's not a problem? So why is Susu, Dashe, why is it a problem? See, so to counter those things, you know, and that's why I get it, a lot of my fights that I do at home, I don't fight outside. You must fight within the system. So what I do, so if there's a problem, I need to isolate that problem and then look at the parallel. What is the system doing? Then I will show you that what you're arguing with me is that you're already doing it. So I will show you how this system is this. So that's what we just need to do. I think that that makes the issue of the name is flawed there already, that there is no argument. There shouldn't be an argument. Because remember, again, is who has the right and who has the right to police the other, and that this system must refuse to be policed. Because if not, you're falling again under that racial order, and we say no to that.
There's a question here.
Hi, thank you so much for this conversation. I'm learning a lot. This is my first time sort of hearing about this whole world. And I'm wondering if you could talk more about what does this mean generationally? You know, people are coming from, like you mentioned your own children, for example, who, you know, when they go to Nigeria, it's a vacation for them. So they're sort of once removed from, you know, a whole society that has a deeply embedded understanding of, and, you know, cultural practice of doing this, and now we're transported. So I'm wondering for, you know, the diaspora and the next generations, who aren't dealing with cash, right? They're not saving like actual dollars in a shoebox, right? They're dealing digitally. They're interfacing with all of these other things, and they're under serious pressure too, as we see like all of the fault lines of, and the lack of the promise, right? Of like, get an education, go out there, and your future will be guaranteed, and so on. So, and then there's the fracture of just, family, connection to culture, and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm wondering what happens generationally with all of this.
Yeah, do shy. Okay, so thank you, Professor Rook. That's a good question. So it's mixed. Generationally, first of all, Muslim Canadians have a hard time accessing any kind of loan that has a tax on it, or interest rate, I should say interest. It's not, especially if they're observing. I know some might be on the calls, they will know this. So I find a lot of younger generations, Somalis, Sudanese, Egyptians, in the area here in Toronto and in Montreal, they were very much following and watching closely how their parents accumulated funds. And they may not be doing it in cash, they'll do it online. They might do it online, they might do it through checking system, but they're doing it because there are some limits to how they can borrow from banks if banks have interest rates, and that's just how it works. The banking system hasn't thought about how to address, but Muslim people, Pakistanis, are still buying houses and wanting to do things, but how do they access monies? And there are different groups doing things. They're doing bigger sizes of chit, for example, in the Pakistani community, where they're buying houses, and one family will get a house and then the next will get it. And the younger generation are watching how those systems operate and following suit. I know from the Somalis I work with in the West End, they do small trainings of other groups. And it's not necessarily just to other Somalis, it's to any younger person who may find a hagabad of use, can come to the local community center. So actually that's what I'm doing with some of my research money, is having them go out there and train and talk to people about what they see. How can this become? I mean, some of them are very clear, we need a Hagbad bank, as you said, and that's what they want to call it. But they're going around training people on how to do this kind of. There are others that I heard, particularly in the Caribbean community, where they find that their kids might be detached from these systems. They might be like, oh, we're good savers anyways, we don't participate in this, but they know that their parents do it, They may not do it for the same reasons, or they may not do it at all, and that they want to learn. So I have some groups who are either from the Nigerian or various Caribbean, mostly Jamaican backgrounds, who are actually trying to teach the younger generation. And so they've had these, I think you came to one of the meetings in Jane and Finch. It was 101, Literacy 101. And it wasn't literacy like trying to teach people the basic commercial finance. It was about like, here's what you already know. And they wanted to learn about these systems of collectivity. So there is some knowledge that is missing and not being passed down. But then there are some groups who have limited choice. And this is what they have to learn to kind of get through Canadian society. And these are kids who are born and raised here. But they know that because of certain commitments to their religion, they can't participate. I don't know.
I would agree.
Okay.
I would agree with that. And I sometimes think of that too. So my grandmother was in a partner, my mom was in a partner, my aunts were partner banker ladies. I was in a partner. I was never the banker lady. Thanks. I was never the banker lady, but I was in a partner. So it's just, it's what you see your family doing, and this is how my sister bought a house. She bought her first house because she was in a partner, saved up all that money, put down a big fat down payment, and now generational wealth for her son and her grandchildren. So it's something that we see as we see our elders doing, and I think if you saw that it worked for your family, it's something you will do for yourself. And online, it's
and tell them your story.
My story. So have these political aspirations. It's very expensive to run an election, like very expensive, $50,000 up to $200,000. So when I decided to run, no one had $50,000 or $200,000, but we were in a partner. So I was in a partner, I had a hand, my mom had a hand, different people had a hand, and that's how donations came in, because you have a short window to collect money. The campaign office, campaign manager signs lots of things, and that is why finances are a barrier to running for office, and right now to purchase homes and to start a business. Finances are such a huge barrier that being in a partner helps people buy homes. Especially now, it's incredibly expensive, or helps people run for office or start a business or do whatever they have to do. So it's something that we use, my family uses, and that helped me when I was running in my campaign.
And I think that even young people, I think that if there is information, the only thing that will stop young people from doing AJO or whatever they choose to call it would be lack of information. And I'll give you an example of my 18-year-old. And he started working, when he turned 17. And, so I told him, I said, you remember, the good book, you need to know what to do. You need to save, because now you're working. There are things I'm not going to be buying for you anymore. So you're earning now. So, but you have to save, and you know what you're spending, and, all of those things, And so he began to save. But, he had, so then his friends taught him that save in credit union. His friends told him that. Do you understand? So this information is circulating.
Yes.
So we just need to, so it will come out. So his friends told him save in credit union. So he came and told me, said, oh, my friend said we should save in credit union. He was trying to look for his passport. He wanted to go and, open the credit union and blah, 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 and all of those. I said, what do you need credit union for? He said, oh, my friend said. So I sat him down and gave him the history of all of the different kinds of saving, how you can open your account. Within your account, you can save within your account. So if you are disciplined, you can transfer the money online. So I told him why people say save in credit union. They told me the story when I came to Ireland. So obviously his friend's mom had told him that same story. When I came to Ireland, they told me that. I think I mentioned it already, that if you want to buy a house, I think you use credit union, but, like I did my own thing. But, they said if you want, save small in credit union, then you get 5 times that at very low. Do you understand? So that information goes around and kids learn. Now, Revolut, they are so good. Look at all of this. Now we've come up with fancy ways. You go out for a meal, split it, share it, all of those things. It's already that system of, putting something aside. It's already, the structures are already in place. It just needs to be harnessed, So I think that young people are not going to refuse it. They want those Jordan boot runners, which moms are not buying any. Once you start working, whether you're 17, 18, once you start working, you buy your own Jordans. Yeah, those things are expensive, man. So they have to save for them. I mean, I used to go to the stores to buy them. Now I'm free. Like I'm here now. I'm like, okay, I might think about it, but I don't know. But yeah, I used to make a trip to the States once. It was only COVID that stopped me, saved me, let's say. Because I used to bring my boys, here, and we would go to the outlet malls, and, I would buy those things, but now they're buying them themselves. But what I'm saying is that the systems are already in place. They have these fancy tastes, and they know to put a little aside to make it work. So I think that, the young people, we might think, oh, they're so, no, it's the same system. It's getting handed down as well.
There's a question from the live stream, Lisbeth Media. ROSCAs etc. seems to me to be a technology that needs to be mainstreamed in the current late-stage capitalist world we live in. It can fund business startups too. What's the holdup?
Yeah, that's a good question, PK. I think that we're so focused on growth and being with the big tier banking institutions, RBC, TD, all of them, Scotiabank, that continually harm people. And now I'm at this point where I don't want to do those kinds of segments for CBC anymore, of saying why someone has been harmed walking into a mainstream commercial bank, because we have options. We have options, and switching banks is not complicated. It doesn't take a lot to say, hey, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to switch from, my RBC and move to a Meridian or move to Alterna, or whatever your credit union is, your favorite. Look them up and see who they are and make those decisions. And I think that when you're a member in a credit union or cooperative, you can start now advocating for different types of financial systems. And I think that's the problem right now. People are not seeing our banker ladies in Canada. We have a debt of gratitude for the work that they're doing. Now the hard work is, how do we make it a movement, right? Like, how do all of you, and I think all of you in this room, everyone online, we actually need you, the Banker Ladies Council, right, Andrea?
Right.
We need them to figure out, how are we going to fund this financial revolution? How are we going to make sure that we wake up the world to be a part of banking institutions that value membership in the banks that we participate in, and that there's some sort of ethics around the ways in which we do banking. And I think the ROSCA system is ready. It's ready. It's right here. We know that women are doing it throughout this country, and not just Black women. Women from various cultural groups. I mean, I interviewed a bunch of hospital orderlies in Montreal, in West Montreal, and they told me that their ROSCA started off as a Jamaican partner, but so many of the women working there were from the Philippines, or they were French Canadians, but they were all sharing the same class group as orderlies and kind of not treated well in the hospital. And they joined the Jamaican partner. So it's not just a cultural affiliation, it's actually something that's bringing real value to a broad spectrum of people, particularly women. And I think it's very feminist in its orientation. It's about all of this self-help. I think, people have mentioned here about the reciprocity. It's not as informal as we think it is. People have thought through how to manage these systems. They've been hiding it because of harms. And I think that all of you here have a responsibility to work with us to get the word out. Even if it's to spread the idea of what a banker lady or ROSCA is, take the time to do so. And we'll be so grateful, because that's what we're trying to do, is cause a lot of confusion and make people rethink the ways in which we do banking. Good question. Thanks, PK.
Thanks very much for the talk. I'm learning a lot here tonight as well. I wasn't familiar with this topic, so it's been very informative and insightful. Now, a question for you about credit unions, given that I am from Meridian. What would you want them to do differently than what they do now to support the banker ladies or ROSCAs in the future?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I'm so happy that Meridian has showed up today on a snowy day in Toronto, but I think that I'm not going to speak completely. Andrea's here from the Banker Ladies Council too, so I might put you on the hot spot too. But I think that from what I remember from our last conversation is that they really do need some subsidies to get the ROSCA Federation started, so that if we can hire some banker ladies to start imagining what a ROSCA Federation would look like, so that they can invest in the training of cooperative values in their community, start making sure that they are connecting with policymakers, those where the real harms are happening in the law enforcement. I think that these are ways that Meridian might be able to assist us in their community programming, is to see that, hey, there's a ROSCA Federation that is very much alive, that can actually grow the cooperative banking system, particularly where credit unions have a bit of a reputation of being male, pale, and stale, right? Like, you all know that, right? This is not a secret. I'm a cooperator. I do everything with cooperative institutions, but there is this kind of image that still plagues the cooperative system. But what we're trying to do is push away from a dominant corporate model. And if we can think consciously about how to change the way we do business, and if credit unions, even as Ebun was saying, make sense and it's closely aligned with a ROSCA system, then why don't we figure out a way of supporting a ROSCA Federation? And that will start with some real subsidy to sort of administratively figure out how they start drawing in their members. And members are ready to pay the dues to be a part of a ROSCA system, because they'll trust that ROSCA system at its apex. So I think what we do need is some financial support. Andrea, what do you think?
I would agree. Subsidies are good. And also, I think the first financial institution that gets on board with ROSCAs wins.
Yeah.
There are ROSCAs all over the country that, like you were saying, some of us are at banks, some of us are not at banks. And if you partner with ROSCAs now, people will need mortgages and credit cards and lines of credits and bank loans. It is the beginning of that nurturing relationship. So I truly believe the first financial institution that gets it will just win, because there will be a loyalty and an understanding. And then, like on the micro level, little things like silly fees for depositing money or transferring money, because money will come from could come from 100 different accounts. If people are sending an email transfer to one account, the fees can be ridiculous. Some accounts you're limited by how much money you can send out or how much money you can collect in, little things like that. And then that would encourage people who do these ROSCAs. There's interest that can be made. Look, what if you collect $20,000? That money needs to be someplace, and you can be collecting a little bit of interest on that. So little things like that. But subsidies are great. Subsidies are real. Subsidies are good.
Definitely. Smart subsidies.
One more question?
Or did you
Well,
want to? Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you both. I mean, we thought we were coming for a talk, but we actually came for a revolution, so thank you. And I just wanted to just bookend in terms of, Caroline, you'd said you'd started out doing research on microcredit systems and essentially their harms, and now we're ending with a discussion of kind of banking as part of capitalism. And I'm just wondering, banks make profits. And in the frameworks that you two are speaking about, is there a profit model, or is it just the profiting of a community? And I know that's a bit reductive, but I mean, even if you just kind of signal, why did microcredits end up being so incredibly problematic? Because it's supposed to elevate the poor in the global south, and guess what? That's not really what happened. So so that's my question in terms of, is there a profit here? If you're, I mean, in some ways, I've got this question.
Yeah, and I think that's the point of the ROSCA system, right? It's kind of like, that's not the first reason that people join these systems. It's about, usually there's a crisis that happens, and that's like any other that's why cooperatives actually came to the fore. There was some sort of crisis in society, and people felt like they had to come together to create an alternative sort of institution to the mainstream. And I think ROSCAs are sort of refusing to be on that profit model. Like, that's not what's driving them. If they can be sustainable, recover their costs, if there's any costs, then fine. But most of them, it's about giving. It's the giving that is bringing the joy. And remember, you're accessing a lump sum of money without a lot of paperwork, with a lot of support system. As you mentioned, like, you get a lot of business advice. And some groups may charge you a nominal fee. Like, I know there are some Jamaican partners in the city that have a lot of members to track. And so sometimes if there are costs involved, then the group will get together and they will decide how much each person will pay that chief person for administering that. But that, again, is a group decision. It's usually done to sort of like address, you know, the expenses that one would have to pay. So what they're focused on is the social profitability, I guess, or the social dimension of what they're doing. And yes, business matters, but it also matters how we do this uplifting together. So I drive a taxi cab. I need to pay all these licensing fee to get my own cab so that I can really make a good living instead of renting it. Everyone will pool resources to make that happen for that one person. But what they understand as a group, they will not complete that work until all 5 or 10 of them have that taxi cab. See, that's the commitment. What did you say? Ubuntu.
Ubuntu.
I am because you are. The whole idea of the sustainable mindset is to not only think about how you personally can get ahead, but how can you and other people also get ahead? I think that's the mindset change, right? It's like moving away from growth to degrowth or this post-capitalist agenda. And there are a lot of people who are riding that wave now because they see the destruction that is happening on our planet. I don't do that work on the environment, but there's a lot of people who do, and they know they can't keep going the way they're going. Well, banker ladies know that in the financial economy sector, we can't keep going to those same committers who commit offenses constantly to people walking into banks. So for them, it's about the social camaraderie and the reciprocity of giving is how you profit, right? Like the mindset is very different. And I think that it's time. And I think PK said, why are we not doing that now? But I wonder, and that's why they don't want to be graduated to a credit union, because their whole thing is that we're ROSCAs in our own right. And we deserve to be recognized as such. That's why we need a federation who can assist us and protect these informal institutions or formalize some of them if they want that to happen. I think that that's where the strain is, or the tension, right? Anything else do you have?
I think that, there is a room, there is room for profiting, where the burden for profiting should rest might be what would free the people. I'll give an example, like, I wanted to foster in Dublin because, we've already used to that idea of, you take in people's kids and take care of them. I didn't want to get paid. I just wanted to foster, And then I went to the foster system and they said, no, it's a formal, we have to investigate you, we have to do all of those things, and then we'll pay you. I'm like, no, don't pay me. I want to just help somebody, bring them into my home. No, but there's a formal system. And so that formal system killed, I did it for 2 years, but it killed the heart because it became a business. I wasn't looking for a business. I wanted to be a blessing. I was blessed and I wanted to bless back. I wanted to take in somebody and put them within a family system and help them to learn values. So it killed the heart. And so if ROSCAs then becomes about profiting, then the heart of ROSCAs is going to die. It takes, give it 5-10 years, it will die. It will then become about the money, to become about the systems. But it is something that I think is worth sitting at the table and looking at because the resource is already there. So how can you then use this system without killing the people at the grassroots? How can we allow them enjoy, this heart of, for some people, that's their only opportunity to give. Like I said, for some of them in Dublin, they want to give to you, but they know that if I give to you and you default, I can't fight you because you're my cousin or you're my mom's sister, But if I give through ROSCAs will collect the money for me. So it's their own way of, I think that people should not have to lose that, and all of that. But is there a way that maybe for the policymakers, for those who sit down to look at it and say, this money is collected, you do your own thing. Then when the money is here, how do we invest it? Or, so because it's like, you get, with all of those things where investment thing, and this is the money you put in, but in 6 years it's become this. So is there a way that this money can be invested? And we have examples from Dublin, charities who monies came in, they started with 2 million, now they have like 10 million sealed, and they don't sell anything, they don't do anything, it's just money's coming in, free money coming in. Yeah, they've been able to seal it and have profit on it. So there's a way that that this system can profit without losing heart. I think it should be explored.
I think we're at time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry.